Welcome to the World Class Speaking podcast series. This is a place where you will learn how to present, persuade, and profit by improving your communication skills. Each episode in the series is a chapter from the book World Class Speaking in Action. And each chapter is written by a certified world class speaking coach. I'm your host, Matt Miller, and I've carefully crafted and summarized each chapter in the book. Have you ever heard a speech or presentation where the speaker was all over the place, jumping from one topic to the next? Or have you ever been confused and distracted in a conversation because your friend seemed to be talking about one thing, then all of a sudden she's talking about a whole different subject? In this episode, you're going to learn to use transitions from one topic to the next so you don't unnecessarily overlap multiple ideas. You'll learn how to be clear and easy to understand. And this is episode 6. It is the transitions, the most neglected part of your speech. And it is by Catherine McKenzie. And Catherine McKenzie is a certified world class speaking coach and an award winning international speaker, author, and trainer. And transitions are so important because you must bridge your points in a fluid motion. First, to ensure that your audience is still with you, and second, to ensure that your audience still wants to continue with you. If you do not use transitions, you will confuse your audience because you'll be jumping from one topic to the next and there will be no smooth break. There are 3 factors that transitions must incorporate. And the first one is summarize, the second is anticipate, and the third is importance. Summarize, anticipate, importance. The number one thing you want to do when considering a transition is you want to call back to where the audience has been. You want to remind the audience where they've been. You want to summarize the past point. And then after you summarize the previous point, and then you tease the audience by showing them where they're going to go by anticipating a future point, the third step is showing them why it's important that they go there. You want to tell them why it's important for them to come along with you, and you want to foreshadow any result that they will receive. Now, I'm going to jump away and now give an example from my personal life of how I've used transitions. And an example was a Toastmasters speech that I gave, and the speech was titled From a Poor Reader to a Book Achiever. And the main message of the speech was that your past does not predict your future. And then I share about how I went from absolutely despising reading and never doing it to becoming a lifelong reader and doing it all the time, and eventually reading a book per week. And I did that for a 2.5 year period after I read that first book. So I got some initial taste, read my first book, and then I ended up doing that for every single week for 2.5 years. And I talk about in the first paragraph of this speech on how I was a poor reader and I struggled with it and I hated reading comprehension. I think back to school when we had to do accelerated reading tests and we had to read a book and then quiz ourselves, go to the computer, and they would ask a summary of 10 questions. And for these accelerated reader tests, you had to get at least, I think it was 6 correct out of 10 in order for you to get credit. If you got 7 correct, you get more credit, 8 more credit, and then a 10 out of 10 would give you the most credit. But you had to get a certain amount of points every semester. And I would read a book, and if I was to get a 5 out of 10, that book would be a wash. And I would read a whole nother book, and hopefully I would do better on this accelerated reading test so that I could finally get credit towards that semester of reading. I hated this. And that transitioned into me, not really loving school either because I was a poor reader. I didn't really see the point in it. I didn't really try in school. But I go over everything that I struggled with reading. That was paragraph 1. And then the next paragraph in my speech talks about how I'm now a book achiever. I've had success. I've read a book a week for 2.5 years. I've learned so many different things while reading, and I've come to enjoy it, and it's something that I won't change. And when I gave the speech at Toastmasters, I didn't talk about how I struggled with reading so much. And then immediately my next sentence being, then I became an incredible reader and achiever. That's not how it worked. I had a transition from struggling to achieving. And the transition was the following. Although I had many reading challenges in my past, such as reading comprehension, this all changed when I discovered the one secret that eventually allowed me to read a book per week for over 2 years. And now I want to share with you how I did it. Now that's a transition because I called back to where I've been, how I struggled with reading. I teased the audience on where we're going with me reading a book a week for 2 years. And then I showed them why it's important that we go there. Because I tell them, I want to share with you the success that I had by the discovery of the one secret that led to that success. And then it foreshadows that secret. But that's an example of using a transition. And it's very important to do that because if we don't use those transitions, we're not going to be clear from one section of our speech to the next. And here are some transition tips. First, you should memorize your transition. You should highlight it on your speech. There's no reason that you should be going and giving a speech and not knowing the transition. The transition is so important. Another thing you can do is you can change stage location to align a verbal transition with your physical movement. For example, you think about it, a reader will read left to right. So when you're looking out at your audience, you could start on the right side of the stage because it's opposite of what they're looking at, which would be their left. And then you can move to your left, which would be the audience's right. So you'd move from the audience's left to right as an example of a timeline. So if I was to give the speech, I could use the left side of the audience's view. For example, for that speech, what I could do is I could start on the one side of the stage and I could start with the struggle or the past, and then I can move to the other side of the stage and talk about the success. And then maybe in the middle of the stage, I use that location to symbolize a transition. But you can think about it as a timeline. And another thing with transitions is that it's a really good opportunity to incorporate humor. If you're transitioning from one thing to the next, if you get your audience to laugh, they're going to want to pay attention to your next point as well. In summary, it's very important to use transitions so that you can move smoothly from one section of your speech to the next. And remember, it's all about where you took the audience, where you're taking them, and then why they should go there with you. If you can incorporate those three things, your transition will have the maximum amount of value. Now that you know the importance of transitions, I also want to remind you that most people don't use transitions effectively. They're arguably, according to data in the book, the most neglected part of the speech. So moving forward, I encourage you to write down your transitions, memorize them, highlight them, whatever you have to do in order to transition properly. If you can nail down your transitions, it's going to give you confidence to give one section of your speech and then the next section of your speech and make it blend together. And then in the next episode, you're going to learn what a callback is and how it can drive connection with your audience in your speech or presentation. That's all we've got for this episode on the World Class Speaking Podcast series. Until next time, remember that becoming a great communicator is so important because it leads to greater impact, influence, and income. Thank you for listening and have a great day.